Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Moonlit Circle. If you're new here, I'm Gwendie Belle Moone, author, storyteller, and celestial traveler. And today we are continuing with a very intentional journey into what I had in mind for my 2026 resolutions. We aren't just creating random goals. Each item that I chose for my 2026 resolution was chosen with care. And this year, I'm really recommitting to myself and to my loved ones and to my home. And so I thought I would start this year by taking each one of those resolutions and really kind of diving in and breaking them down so that you can see why they're so important to me. And it's a big part of that is how I move in the world. And so today we're going to tackle how I regard movement as a high frequency sense of self-respect and not as a punishment. I think too many of us view exercise and physical motion as punishment, and we're not developing a healthy relationship with our bodies because of that. So let me say again that this is healing work, not punishment. And so, like always, if you're sensitive to physical, emotional, or trauma related topics, please take care of yourself first and step away if you need to. And stick around all the way to the end because today I'll teach you something deeply somatic that really transformed the way that I think about movement, including fascia and how it responds to injury and stress, and why gentle movement not only strengthens your muscle, but also improves your nervous system. A little housekeeping item, real quick, before we dive into today's resolution. I just wanted to share that the New York federal judge overseeing the Blake Lively Justin Baldoni case has ruled that famous people don't get special privileges. So the Reynolds will have to share all their texts with the court and the public on Wednesday. So everyone get your popcorn ready. I think we're going to see some stuff that might be quite eye-opening. Grab your friends, put on your florals, and the great unsealing is coming. Hashtag justice for Justin. So can't wait for that one. This is really doing my current midlife crisis some good following this Blake Lively case. And, it's all in good fun, but I am finding some very real, topics that kind of bleed over into how we can, look at Blake Lively and learn from her mistakes on how to be better human beings. And I'd like to personally thank the Reynolds for my midlife crisis entertainment. There's absolutely nothing more satisfying than watching bullies get smacked around by karma a little bit. So, thanks. By the light of the silvery moon, I want to till my honey I'll love you. I didn't really have a lot to say on this particular resolution when it comes to, my writing experience and my life experience. Movement is something that I've always, up until the last couple of years, I had always considered punishment because your girl's lazy. I would rather not. You want to jog around the park? No, thanks. Like, that's not my jam. So movement for me really ended up being more of like a necessary evil. Essentially, like, you need it. You need that aerobics, you need that strength training. So I guess you have to throw it in there somewhere. But I'm here to tell you, over the last couple of years, and with finally not only losing the excess weight, but after plastic surgery, losing the excess skin really reconnected me with my body and my emotions. And I'll be honest, prior to plastic surgery, I was not fully connected to my body. I could not, I don't know if maybe I was blocking out parts of it, emotionally, quite likely, but I just didn't. There was some level of disconnection there that I can't quite articulate. I can't quite put my finger on what it was, but that reconnection just sort of snapped into place after having 14 pounds of extra skin removed and 2 liters of fat sucked out, and now bam, all of a sudden I know where everything's at, and I can feel things internally, and it all makes sense, and it feels like my body again. It feels like I'm not dissociated from the container that I found myself in, which did happen quite a bit when I was younger. And now I feel that connection. It's not me and my body. It's not me versus my body. We are one and the same. And so, anyways, beyond that, esoteric level of looking at it, I don't have much to say on, movement as a virtue and as a resolution to really focus on for 2026 when it comes to being a writer, or when it comes to just my everyday life and, branding myself as an author. So I'll skip those sections, and we'll move into all things love, because there we can really start to look at how physicality and being a highly physical and high mobility individual really is a bit of a control issue. And so and it's interesting to see that level of control in comparison to the realm of love and relationships. So let's shift into that, the realm of all things love, because the way we move in our bodies actually mirrors the way that we move in love. And you can tell, as I was just talking about, feeling disconnected from my body, dissociated from the physical vessel that I was in. It's not great. That's not a great way to know yourself or to be able to love yourself. And so that disconnection keeps you thrown off balance. And you can imagine that when you're applying yourself into a relationship, maybe some of you isn't there. Maybe you're not all in it because you can't even figure out your own body and living in your own skin. So, it raises a question, if you don't have that good relationship with yourself, what are you bringing to a relationship? With somebody else, with a whole other human being. And so the way we move our bodies really really often mirrors the way that we move in relationships. And when movement feels like debt, going back to that, sensing movement as a punishment, something we do to make up for like the evils that have been done by eating or resting or taking up space, when we try to overcorrect those guilty pleasures with movement, it quietly teaches the body patterns that later show up in love, such as control instead of trust, over giving instead of reciprocity, self erasure instead of presence. So you can see how it can really put a dampening veil over how you even view yourself in a relationship. So, in contrast, self-respect, really practiced in the body and in movement, it becomes a blueprint for healthy pacing in relationships. when your body's rhythm is guided by care rather than pressure, your emotional boundaries naturally strengthen. And I know that sounds silly, but you can't ignore all of the people who say that, looking inward changed their lives, learning how to meditate, saved their marriage, those kinds of things. So, it's really good to become in tune with your body so that you know where you are in space and time, and you can start to give of yourself to others. If you're wandering through this life confused and out of sync with your own body, then what is it that you're bringing to other humans that you're in contact with on the most intimate level on a daily basis? And listening to physical limits, your own physical limits, really matters here too. Each time that you honor a limit in your body, like stopping when you're tired, adjusting when something hurts, you're building an internal capacity to honor limits in others without resentment or collapse. I don't know if you've ever seen anyone go through troubling times after you've been through something similar, and really kind of sit with yourself on how that situation makes you feel. Are you upset with the person that you're observing because they didn't do things the way you did it? Are you judging them because they have yet to take action in their situation where you would have? So, it's really kind of setting those limits and boundaries in your own body helps you to learn to respect others as well. And over time, movement becomes less about really correction and more about devotion to yourself. It's a daily tending rather than, a test that you are either going to succeed or fail. And because true love in the body or in relationships isn't really about proving worth, it's about caring for what is already there. And so I know that's kind of, a very internal woo-woo way of looking at it, but I really feel that, knowing yourself and really learning who you are, not only emotionally, but also physically, is only going to help bring you closer to others in a relationship. But the more that you don't know who you are, the more that you are disconnected from your own mind and body, um, the more you invite complications and, uncertainties into a relationship. There's more doors that are open that are not secured and don't know what they're going to let in. So, something to think about here, because all of this brings us to a bigger question is, what stories are we being sold about movement and physicality out in the world at large? And so, the world is all a commercial. Everything is a commercial now. We we have entered a phase of our lives where every little corner is its own subculture. And what I'd like to talk about right now is mainstream fitness culture. I don't want to shame it, but I do want to help us all kind of understand its language and its promises, whether it be false promises or maybe just promises that are a little too hefty for the people that are being offered or sold the product. So much of mainstream fitness culture really is built on a quiet but powerful lie that movement is a form of debt repayment for eating, resting, and simply existing. I didn't make that shit up myself. I mean, there's a whole commercial industry for this stuff, and this is exactly how they want it. They want it to be a punishment. They want you to feel guilty for enjoying food, rest, or just being a different, physical shape than the average person. So punishment is sold to the masses, and I guess we're talking about, developed countries. We're talking about countries where, the average person is like, I think that I should focus on my nutrition, and I think that I should focus on my physical activity because maybe life is a little too comfortable and I'm a little too sedentary. So talking about those populations. Within those populations, commercialism has just really exploded. And so punishment is actually being sold to the masses as a discipline, a form of discipline, and it's framed as a virtue. If you could stick with the plan, you can get the results. As if the body kind of owes productivity in order to be worthy of care. And you even set yourself up for this process. You tell yourself, and even calendars and things are kind of set up this way nowadays, where it goes, okay, if you do everything right this week, what will your reward at the end of the week be? Well, shouldn't you want to get all your things done anyway, just to have things done? Is that not the reward? But no, we've kind of we've made everything reward based, and so now that we've established in our society that exercise is a punishment that you must endure. And it is virtuous if you endure it all the way through to see results. The think about how we all salivated with expectation, waiting for the next episode of The Biggest Loser. Just think about the commercialism there, and watching those poor souls learn with every pound lost and with every bead of sweat dripped off their forehead that their entire worth was conditional and health was purely aesthetic and only attainable by pushing through the pain and the shame. And we all tuned in just ready to see these people destroyed. And that was a cultural phenomenon. Now, of course, this is out of control. This is an out of control pendulum swing, and that pendulum has since swung all the way into delusional positivity for morbid obesity, allowing space for obesity to wallow comfortably in sedentary stagnation, and be proud of that. And then this pendulum has since swung all the way back again to muscle wasting Ozempic tragedies. We have all seen the Osbournes. What is going on there? It's concerning. And health doesn't even enter the equation. This is all based on a health industry, and health doesn't even come into factor. In contrast, movement can be something entirely different. It can be if we focus on it that way. It can be nourishment rather than correction. Exercise can be regulation rather than control. And, finding some kind of sport hobby could be joy rather than penance. And where culture constantly teaches punishment, we can consciously reclaim care, but it has to be an emotional journey as well. It has to be something that you want. This becomes especially clear when we look at the obsession with before and after imagery, which really frames worth as something conditional. Well, did you meet the exact goal? Well, if you did, you're successful. If you did not, you're not successful. So you've got to look at those patterns as well. And something, you want to look to see, is there anywhere where, something you earn once your body has been sufficiently altered, is that the prize at the end of the day? Is it, you can't just feel better. You have to have, receipts. You've got to come with receipts. It can't be as magical as, I feel like a better human being when I run once a day versus, oh, I run once a day, but I wasn't seeing the scale move, so I kicked it up a notch, and now I'm running twice as fast and, 50% longer every morning. Well, now you're turning something that you enjoy into a punishment, and that, you're waiting for some kind of altered visual in your body that will tell the world that you see results. And you don't have to do that. You can just do something because it feels good. But worth isn't a project. Your self-worth isn't a project. It's really a presence, and you have to consider all things in that viewpoint. You have to consider, this is fantastic for me because it increases my blood flow. It, statistically speaking, increases my longevity in life. You're doing this for you. And when we begin to question who truly benefits from exhaustion-based fitness goals, the answer really sharpens very quickly. Profit flows most easily where self-criticism lives. And that is why it is such a major industry. We are all loathing ourselves. We are all judging ourselves in the mirror. And, capitalism is right behind the other side of that mirror going, yes, please buy the newest diet trend. And that's the thing, is that these are trends. We're saying, I'm going to hop on this trend so that I can lose 5 pounds, so that I can fit into a size 10, so that I can wear that dress that I want without the Spanx, those are the goals that we're setting for ourselves, and they're all very superficial, and none of them take into account our happiness, our well-being, our drive, our potential inclination for laziness. None of that is being taken into consideration. So, a culture that thrives on people feeling not enough will always package burnout as motivation and punishment as progress. But we're not going to fall for it anymore, because over here we love ourselves and there's a better way. Stick around at the end and I'll show you. But before we do that, let's take a look at the dark side of the moon. Let's take a look at what happens when movement and physicality and physical motion become harmful. So what happens when movement stops being connected to care and self-love and becomes a distraction or a punishment, because we could go either way. So, this is where we have to look at the shadow self. We have to take a good look inside our own heart. Sometimes movement is avoided to the extremes. And again, lazy girl here, I can attest to this. Think about how the body positivity movement was hijacked by morbidly obese women, for the most part, looking to find acceptance in a world that only offered solutions in the form of these extreme diets and extreme restrictions and extreme exercise programs. They required maximum effort for minimal payoff. So, take the easy route and learn to love and live with and even expand upon the excess pounds you carry instead. This was the new message. in the body positivity movement. This was the new song they were singing on how to love yourself, is that you get to eat whatever you want. You get to be as excessive as you want, and there are no repercussions. Simple, low effort, and tasty, I might add. But the freedom of loving yourself with too many calories in and not enough calories burned back out only brings suffering in the form of eventual chronic illnesses and pain and inevitable early death. Even Lizzo realized this lazy girl mindset was a mistake. And, on the flip side of that coin, sometimes movement stops being a way to care for the body and becomes instead a way to really punish or avoid yourself. So it's self-punishment or it's self-avoidance, and exercise can be used as a tool in either one of those. Exercise can actually very quickly turn into an escape hatch for some people. It's a place where you can outrun grief and discomfort and internal tension rather than, staying in the present and feeling the feelings that your emotions are trying to get you to process. You'll see this with, guys who get broken up with, and all of a sudden they start reinvesting back into themselves by going to the gym. Or maybe women who used to be runners will get back out there and start hitting the pavement again. It can very easily mask emotions and help you regulate without actually going through the paces of resolving those emotions and processing those emotions. So exercise is fantastic for avoiding. And let me tell you, if you're going to use any tool to avoid, exercise is probably the healthiest one. So, if you're out there avoiding something, hop on a treadmill and carry on, girl. Intensity in those moments, it can feel very righteous, when you're burning off energy, and it can even feel very disciplined and productive or virtuous to really lean into, physically getting out your emotions, but you can certainly find some additional energy to put into your workouts when you're avoiding emotion, but that's not it's not the best way to go about things. The high from working out or running or lifting weights or whatever, the runner's high, it doesn't heal what's actually hurting. It just buries it under different sensations, and buried things don't disappear. They wait, they fester, so you still got those emotions under the surface that have to be taken care of, even if you're, running them off and you're looking great and feeling good. You still have those emotions that you're running away from. So there is real grief in unlearning the whole no pain, no gain mindset, because we all bought into it. We've been buying into it since, the 70s, I think, is when it really kind of hit most crowds, as in the exercise realm, in the gym realm. No pain, no gain. Especially for those of us who were taught that, worth is really earned through endurance. Those are the people who they bought into the no pain, no gain, and now they're having to sit with their emotions, and that tension is not imaginary. And releasing it isn't just a physical shift, it's an emotional unlearning too. So it's hard to tell yourself after, 30 or 40 years of knowing that you're not going to get anywhere with physical conditioning or health unless you're in pain and unless you push yourself too far. and then learning, low key yoga stretches. It feels like it's not enough, but I'm here to tell you it's a start. Reclaiming gentleness back into your movements and back into your physical strength and daily life. It really asks us to redefine what strength is, not to abandon it, but gentleness is not, weak or passive. It's being aware. It's being responsive. It is the courage to stay connected to yourself, even when control would feel easier. So some of you have to soften yourself. You have to understand that it's not, the PX90 do or die, just start where you are. And sustainability and showing up every day is what matters more. If movement costs me connection to my body, then that's not wellness, that's avoidance. And that's kind of what I'm trying to relay to you guys today, although I feel like I'm all over the map. But that brings us inward. Really focusing on the self-care aspect of mobility and motion and physical exercise. It brings the physical exercise deeper than just motion. It brings it into the regulation of your nervous system and your sense of safety and self-connection. So, let's bring all that home, literally. Movement as nervous system regulation is where philosophy becomes practice. And I want to give you guys something to take away that, it's a starting point. It's a little grain of sand that you can build on. Gentle, consistent movement works because it builds safety in the body faster than extremes ever can. Walking, stretching, light strength work. These are kinds of movement. These kinds of movements don't shock the nervous system. They're very light, and it's not something to really whip your muscles into compliance. They invite movement as a full incorporated cooperation with all your systems. You want to think about things like a simple morning yoga routine, like Tai Chi, or an easy walk before, sitting down to write, or sitting down for, you pushing out your emails for the day. None of those things is really about, pushing your body to the extremes. They're about showing up. And over time, that matters. Because when movement is predictable and kind, remember, we want to be kind to ourselves, the body starts to trust it. It stops bracing. It stops waiting for the next demand, and it starts to participate instead of defend. This is really where reframing movement becomes really important. You've got to think about movement in a different way. So what if movement wasn't something you did to your body, but something you did with it? You are your body. And so when you start to think about that, when you start to think about regulating and coming into the same space and making sure that you're in tune with your body, because you want to be working with your body. You don't want to be forcing your body to do things. You don't want to be punishing your body. You want to be working with it. Movement as listening. Rest as part of training, consistency over intensity. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Consistency over intensity. And when we shift the goal from performance to presence, something really changes. And this is usually the moment when people start getting curious about fascia. So, what is fascia? Fascia is the connective network that's really been whispering to your nervous system long before you ever heard the word. Fascia is, take a look, it's a continuous web-like connective tissue that runs into and out of and through and all in and amongst our entire body. You can see here in the blue areas how it is all connected, and it looks like it's one band that kind of wraps itself around certain areas of the body. It wraps muscles, organs, nerves, blood vessels, and it isn't separate. It's all one integrated system. And a lot of people don't know enough about it, you know. I like to think of it less as like the internal packaging system and more like a three-dimensional tensioned suit. You know, it's constantly adapting to how you move and how you breathe and how safe your body feels. And when, you know, injury happens, even small injuries, very tiny superficial injuries, fascia is there to adapt. It thickens or stiffens to protect that area. It may shorten or lose glide because it's also, you know, a very lubricated material to help things glide. And so it may change those properties to protect an area that's been injured. It also redistributes tension to nearby areas. So let's say you have an injury in your shoulder, the fascia may tighten up, and then it may utilize, you know, fascia around the shoulder or muscles around the shoulder to compensate for the injury. So the injured area tightens up and stays stiff so that it doesn't get injured further. And now all these other areas are helping to compensate. That's where we get deferred pain sometimes in the orthopedics world. Work comp nurse here. But anyways, you know, I like to think of it less as packaging and more like that suit where it's constantly adapting in, you know, one or two or more areas. And when injuries happen, you know, that's when those little areas, they start getting thickened or they get stiff, or they may change properties and how they glide, or they may tighten up, or, you know, the tension is redistributed to other areas because this area is all tight and protected. So, you know, at first this is like, oh, great, fantastic. We have this protection layer in our body and it's saying, I've got you. But the problem is that, you know, when the nervous system never gets the message that the danger has passed, it continues to hold on. It's holding that pain, it's holding that tension, it's holding on tight. And when that happens, you know, movement patterns can quietly change. You ever seen anybody walk with a limp? Or maybe you watch somebody from behind and you notice that one shoulder dips further than the other shoulder. These are kind of, you know, the quiet patterns that, you know, nobody notices these overnight. This didn't happen overnight. But over the course of years, you know, some area of injury got tightened up and other areas started compensating, and it lends itself to, you know, being able to physically see these alterations in the body mechanics. And, you know, so when that happens, you know, movement patterns change and loads shift to elsewhere, and pain can show up far from where the injury originally happened. And this is why, you know, let's take it, for example, a 10-year-old ankle injury. Let's say you fell off a porch and sprained your ankle. Well, and it was never really addressed. You just kind of like let it elevate for a couple of days and then went about your life, you know, but eventually it started showing up as hip pain. And you're like, where's this hip pain coming from? You're not associating it with your ankle, but over time, your ambulation actually changed. Like the gait patterns that you normally use actually microscopically changed. And over years, that ended up being equating hip pain, because you have been, you got this really tight injured area in your ankle, and your leg decided, the fascia in your leg decided it was going to compensate, and it's overusing other areas in the hip to try to continue to protect the ankle. And all of a sudden you have a gait pattern, that's been developing for years, and it's not your same gait pattern that you had 10 years ago. But you wouldn't notice it, looking one day to the next. It's going to happen over time. And maybe that later becomes back pain, because now your hip is hurting and your hip is developing some tightness, or some different functional strategies for the fascia in the hip, because it's now coming up against chronic injury. And so now it starts to tighten up, and you're feeling deferred tightness and deferred pain starting to happen where the load has shifted now to your lower back. And, you can see chronic tension that you just can't quite explain. Most of the time, this is what has happened. And part of the reason that this happens is because fascia isn't passive. It's deeply sensory. It's packaged with receptors that sense movement and pressure, and receptors that register pain, and receptors that track your internal state and how safe or threatened you feel. The fascia does all of that. And in some areas of the body, fascia actually has more sensory nerve endings than muscles do, which means it's constantly communicating with your nervous system, and it is constantly reacting to your nervous system. And it's not just responding to force, but it's responding to context. This is where conversations about trauma can get kind of confusing. So I want to be very clear here. Fascia does not store memories like the brain does. It's quite different. But it doesn't hold symbolic emotion. It doesn't hold feelings. It doesn't replay past events, so to speak. But fascia does actually reflect protective tension patterns. It reflects a nervous system that stayed activated chronically. And it reflects a body that learned at some point, hey, this isn't safe. So, when stress or injury, so we're talking about, injury that's physical, or stress as injury that's emotional, when stress or injury never fully resolves, fascia may remain braced and tightened, and occasionally irreparably so. It can get really compressed and less elastic, and it can hold on to feelings in the body. Now, is that to say that your tight shoulder is holding on to a good cry session? No. Although when you start to work out the fascia in this area, it may actually cause an emotional response. That does happen to some people. But it doesn't mean that literally that memory is being held in the fascia of your shoulder. But that is to say that over time, your body is going to take on the physical relativity of whatever it is that you are thinking consciously. And if your mind is in a constant state of hyper awareness, anxiety, stress, your body is going to react. Your body is going to brace. And if it's bracing for impact chronically, you're going to have a problem. It's going to affect your muscles, your joints, every aspect of your body. I consider fascia to be kind of like our I don't want to say airbags, but you know how they've been making those new like suits for older people to wear, where if you start to fall, it'll puff up like like an inflatable boat or an inflatable raft, but it's like all around them, so it kind of protects them from head injuries. That's how I feel about the fascia. I think that it just, sometimes it works too good. Sometimes it's a little too receptive. And so you have to keep that in mind that, when you're holding on to emotional stress, you are actually doing physical damage to your body over time. Chronic stress actually increases the sympathetic activation, and breathing can get shallow. It's all tightened up, so breathing can get shallow. Muscles are guarded. Movements become smaller and more rigid, and all you're doing is decreasing your mobility in all of those moments. So over time, this changes tissue hydration too. I mean, the snowball effect is absolutely mind-boggling. It can affect the collagen organization. It can affect your baseline muscle tone. So, trauma and stress isn't stored in fascia like a filing cabinet, but chronic stress absolutely shapes its physical properties. And once that chronic physical tension starts to stick, it's very difficult to get it loosened and working again. It does take a lot of effort to get back to a free-flowing state. This is also why body work, if we'll get into body work on another day, but this is why body work sometimes releases those emotions. What I was talking about, like, if you're literally holding a cry here, that's not how that works out. But when fascia is, gently mobilized, sensory input to the brain changes and protective patterns are disrupted. So basically, if you physically open this fascia area back up and you're working in the shoulder and you're working with the connections there and you're working with where that stiffness had redistributed to and where was that offloaded pressure put, and working on all of those areas, that gives the brain an actual input. It goes, oh, okay. We can relax in that area now. We're no longer in protective mode in that area now, but you have to physically massage the fascia in those areas to get them to break away and to get them to shift away from a guarded state or a safe state. And you can do that physically. You can also do that by, reordering your nervous system through therapies and meditation sessions and things of that nature, but it's not going to be as impactful as physically breaking up adhesions in the fascia. And that transition can trigger tears because, again, by physically breaking up the fascia and the tension in the fascia, you're sending signals to the brain that, hey, we're cool. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Some people who are going through those massages can, they might get like a really, really good sigh out of them. They may shake. There may be an emotional release, and it may hurt. It may actually be very painful, even though there's not a lot of physical rationale behind the pain. It's not like a broken bone. There's not like a strained muscle or anything, but the sensory entanglement that's happening in that tensed area, and again, because the fascia is such a high sensory organ, then that can actually cause some emotional distress and some emotional release. It's not always distress. Sometimes it's a good feeling emotional release. But that's not because emotions were physically trapped in the tissue. It's because the system is recalibrating safety, and it's directly affecting your nervous system. So, it's a state of change, not a memory dump. And, this is where we land. What actually helps fascia change isn't force. and it isn't awareness alone. What helps is, safety plus movement. So I want to take you guys through some fascia self-care here in a second, but I do want to stress that what you need is very slow, varied movements, gentle, sustained stretching. Yoga is fantastic for that. Strength through full ranges of motion, and I would really work on, if you're not a gym girly and you want somewhere to start, I would work on range of motion exercises without additional weight. Make sure that you have your ranges of motion able to do a full range of motion before you start adding weights to that. Because if there are any areas that are stuck or that are, knotted up and need work, need slow release, you don't want to start ripping and tearing muscles in that area. You want to make sure that you've got full range of motion first. So start there. Breath work is also a fantastic place to start, especially very long exhales. If you can start working your way into longer exhales than inhales, that's a good place to start. And myofascial release is something that I think very highly of as a tool to help regulate the nervous system. But I think that it's one of those things that the health industry has decided, oh, we can charge an arm and a leg for this. But you don't need to. You don't need to pay somebody to do this. I can teach you how to do it yourself. And I'll start everybody out very slowly, and we'll work our way up in complexity over time. But today is just kind of a crash course, and I just want everybody to know before we get started that, force alone doesn't work. You have to be aware and doing the motions, and when your movements tell your nervous system you are safe with me, then the body listens and it adapts gently. You don't have to go ripping through muscles to find some pain-free days in your life. So, respectful movement tells your nervous system you are safe with me. So let's start there. All right, everyone. So I'm excited to introduce you to fascia self-massage. For those of you ready to move into really embodied practice, let's explore how to meet your fascia with care. So later I'll go into the actual sections of the fascia and what they're named and how you might get some good twisting motions for self-massage, and how you might get some good stretches, and how you can clear adhesions in the fascia, and that sort of thing. But today I just want to take you through a very quick fascia reset that kind of tackles some of the main areas of fascia tension, and how you can just do a very quick release. And so I invite you into relationship with your body rather than correction of it. So let's do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with a breath facilitated shoulder release. And that's going to allow for long, slow exhales to guide your attention to the upper thoracic space. So take a deep breath in. And as we slowly exhale out, you're going to take the pads of your fingertips and you're going to apply minor curious pressure along the upper trap. And you're not looking for anything in specific. You're not trying to outline the muscle shape exactly. You are not trying to force a release. All you're doing is noticing where the tissue feels guarded or tired, and you're applying fingertip pressure all through here, all through the muscle area, all as far back on the scapula as you can comfortably reach. And you're just applying that very light pressure there. And from there, you're going to move into the neck and the jaw, and you're going to use gentle gliding pressure. Still with your fingertips. You can use soft circular touches along the muscles on either side of the neck and along the jaw, keeping the intention clear. And don't press hard. There's a lot of very sensitive stuff in here, so you're not wanting to press hard at all here. But what you are doing is just releasing areas that have tension. You're just going to find those areas and you're going to go at it just over and over right there in that area. Now, for the calf and the ankle, take a little light ball, a little tennis ball, or you can use a yoga roller, and you're just gonna roll that slowly and let the movement be reflective of wherever you're feeling the tension rather than forceful. You don't want to dig that ball into the tissue, but you just, when you find an area that's got a little bit of tension in it, you just want to gently roll that over and over and over that area. And over time, that's going to release that tension. And gentleness really matters there. You don't want to overdo it. We're not here to cause pain. And finally, we are going to work on the chest and the heart opener. What we can do is place a gentle palm over the sternum. And you're going to pair that with light pressure and guided breath. So you're going to do your inhales and exhales, and you're just going to be aware of your hand here on your sternum. And that's allowing the nervous system to register safety. Just this, and some deep breaths. And just by doing this, you can help to release other areas of fascia tension, not even on the areas that you're touching, just by relaxing. This isn't about fixing tension, but it's about reminding the body that it's allowed to soften and that you're safe. And, each of these practices is an invitation to your body to open up. It's not a demand. It's not punishment. And you have to effectively remind yourself of that before you start in emotion for the day. It's a way of saying to your body, I'm here for you and I'm listening and I'm not trying to cause you pain. So, where in your body, in doing that little practice, are you sensing tension or a need for protection? Because that's what an area of tension is subconsciously a need for protection. So keep that in mind. And how does movement feel when you introduce care before pressure? Does it feel different if you are acknowledging a body part and saying, I'm here for you, and feeling for potential areas of tension and kind of allowing some soft tension on those areas to help release the pressure? Does that feel different for you than just diving into a 90-minute torture session with aerobics? Does that feel good for you? So, you want to tend to your fascia, not fix it. You want to invite safety back into your body. That's what I'm trying to relay here. And, movement has its place, but it doesn't have to be a punishment. So, I do want to take you guys to the night sky because we do have a couple of events happening this coming week, and I'll help you guys tie them into the symbology that they have along with them. So the new moon actually occurred last night. So this week the moon appears as a waxing crescent. It's the little thin sliver visible after sunset, and getting bigger. I always remind myself that waxing is when the moon is getting bigger night by night, and waning is when the moon is getting smaller. And the way that I remember that is that waxing is like a candle. And when you light a candle, more wax gets on the outside of it. And you wax it again when you light the candle, and more wax gets on the outside of it. And so the candle gets bigger and wider and wider at the base as it's being waxed. So I don't know, that seems silly, but that's how I remember which one is the phase where we are gaining more moon night by night, and which is the phase where our shadow is overcoming the moon night by night. And, because the moon is still, it's very early in its cycle, it won't dominate the night sky this week, but that's going to help create darker conditions that make it easier to spot planets and star clusters. So, works for us. So Thursday and Friday night, the moon and Saturn are actually going to appear very close together in the western sky after sunset. And again, I'm over on the west coast of the US, so that helps to give you a point of reference. And and it's an easy pairing to observe with the naked eye. You don't even need to bring out your binoculars or telescopes. Meanwhile, the Orion Nebula is actually going really strong as one of the most accessible deep sky sightings this time of year. So it's not, it's not new to this time of year, but this is the time of year to be able to catch it. It's a little tricky to catch it, but it sits pretty low on the horizon in the early evenings, and it rises higher as the night goes on, but then it stops being as visible. So it does really offer breathtaking view through binoculars or a small telescope if you are able to catch it. And again, dark skies this week with the waxing crescent moon, so this would be a perfect time to try and catch it. And symbolically, the waxing crescent moon reflects really gentle beginnings. Like we're just coming into new intentions and new initiations, and a season for planting ideas and habits or desires that grow through care rather than force. And the moon, the moon's closeness to Saturn, that actually adds a little bit of stability to our week, grounding, if you will. So we are going into the week very, very stabilized, very grounded, but also planting our new ideas. We have some new ideas rattling around, and it's a kind of disciplined softness that really reminds us structure and intuition don't oppose one another. They work best together. And so that, I think that's fantastic, bringing some organization into our creative realm this week. And so it's time to reflect on what we learned today. Remember, let's see how fascia works. You really want to ask yourself, where in your body have you felt protection long after danger? Where have you felt that tightness continue long after an injury had healed? And how has your movement response reflected that story? Has it changed your ambulation? Has it changed your gait? Did you have an old motorcycle injury and it over years it changed how you walk or how you sit? Or how you take stairs. So it's a good idea to really know who you are, and that goes beyond the emotional level and the intelligence level. You want to know yourself on a physical level as well. So this is your sign, Moonlit Circle. So share your reflections in the comments or start a journal at home this week. Again, we've got great energy for bringing some organization to our creativity. So that would be a fantastic journal entry, and practice one gentle fascia self-massage this week. You can look them up. You can type in YouTube fascia self-massage, and you'll find a whole lot of stuff. It's quite an educational realm, so you probably will learn the names of the fascial areas and what muscles they affect and stuff if you dive into that. I have not yet found somebody who just teaches the self-massage without the education aspect. So if I find something like that, I'll let you guys know if you want to just dive in without knowing all of the the facts and the details. But when you're giving yourself that self-massage, notice what shifts. Notice where you feel tenderness and think back to your history, and did you have an actual physical injury in that area, or could it have been associated to a physical injury somewhere nearby that area, and maybe now you're feeling compensatory pain, or compensatory tightness or immobility. So you definitely want to know what's going on with those areas that speak to you. And so if you do the finger pad method on your fascia and on your muscles, you're going to find those areas. You're going to find the areas of tenderness, and then you can start negotiating them and figuring out, well, how did that injury happen, and what can you do to help release that? So, keep moving. Keep moving, Moonlit Circle. It's not to punish. It's not to prove anything. It's not for transformation's sake in and of itself, but to tend to what is already there, to tend to yourself, to care for yourself. So don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that bell so you can join this glowing little corner of the internet as we continue to move with respect. And remember, where movement costs you connection, it's not wellness, it's avoidance. Keep dreaming, keep wandering, and keep glowing. Gwendie out.
By the light of the moon.